All right, hey guys, we're back and we are looking this time at pathological divisions of labor. If you remember last time, Durkheim said, hey, you know what? I think the division of labor can be a source of common morality because if we are all interdependent on each other and we recognize that we are interdependent on each other, that we need each other, and that cooperating is how we meet our needs, well, that can promote a feeling of solidarity. Marx, as I said, would have rolled over in his grave. Durkheim recognized that this wasn't what was happening either. He's a scientist, and he's looking around and he's seeing what's around him. And he says, okay, so that's not happening. Why isn't it happening? And he suggests that there are both normal divisions of labor and pathological divisions of labor. And so what he implies is that, or what he doesn't imply it, what he says is the reason that we're failing at having this common sense of morality is that we have pathological divisions of labor. He identifies three of them. DOL is an abbreviation for division of labor. Anomic, forced, and poorly coordinated. And I'm going to talk about each of those really briefly. An anomic division of labor actually stems from the fact that a society celebrates individuality a little bit too much. Remember when we talked about this weak collective consciousness, we talked about how religion isn't at the center of it, individuals are at the center of it. And Durkheim is going to say, well, that can go too far. If individuality is too much celebrated, then people don't feel as though even if they are in this division of labor where they are interdependent, they don't see it, they don't recognize it, and they feel isolated. The term anomic is the adjective form of the French noun anomie, which is spelled A-N-O-M-I-E instead of a C at the end. And what it refers to is a lack of clear moral standards, which is the problem that we're describing right now, right? A problem of establishing a common morality. He says if individualism is celebrated too much, then people don't feel attached enough to society to kind of repress their pleasure seeking. And they end up with an experience of anomie, something we talk about in my intro class as well, the fact that what standards should I be applying to myself? How do I know, should I be pursuing a high-paying job? That's a reasonable standard. Or should I be pursuing a job that is as fulfilling to me as possible? That's a reasonable standard too, and those two things don't necessarily go together. Okay, so that's the anomic division of labor. It results from too much societal celebration of individuality. The second division of pathological division of labor is what he calls the forced division of labor. Now, when you hear forced labor, obviously your mind goes to slavery. There's not slavery really happening at the end of the 19th and early 20th centuries. So what he's talking about here, and this you probably will recognize, is outdated norms and expectations that can force people, and sometimes whole categories of people, into positions that they're not suited for. The type of person gets excluded from entire classes of professions. When we think about this nowadays, we generally speaking think about racism and sexism. The fact that even today, even in the 21st century, we have a gender disparity when it comes to science, technology, engineering, and and math. I just forgot the M in STEM. Well, we have problems of sexism, of women not being as welcome there. Well, in a situation like that, you end up with those people who might have felt inclined to go in that direction being shunted off into a different occupation, and that is what he means here as a forced division of labor. We have the same issue in terms of racial disparities when it comes to certain occupations. So in those situations, you end up with people who don't feel, again, integrated into this common morality. They feel as though, racism and sexism do this, they make you feel as though you are not as that you're not as welcome, treated as equally as other people in a particular society. Okay, so that's the forced division of labor. Don't think slavery, think racism and sexism being ways that force people out of the positions that they might want to pursue into ones that into other ones that they aren't as interested in. And the third one is the poorly coordinated division of labor. The poorly coordinated division of labor, what he's talking about here is if people's specializations don't result in increased interdependence, they just result in isolation. This one's a little bit harder for me personally to understand. My best way of conceptualizing it, of understanding it, is of a person who has a job but feels as though they aren't particularly contributing anything. You could have a relatively mindless job, and that's not great, right? Marx talked about alienation his entire life. But you could have one where you feel like, yeah, but I'm still contributing something to society. Maybe you manufacture, maybe you work at a factory that manufactures containers for medicines. And yeah, you're not the doctor, you're not the pharmacist, you're not the research scientist, but your job is vitally important, right? It keeps people alive. Whereas, let's say my job is manufacturing glitter. Like, I like glitter, but it's not really necessary to the functioning of society. And to the extent that I don't enjoy the glitter manufacturing process, I may feel like, well, how am I useful? What do I contribute? What's the point of my job? And at that point, it's hard to feel like, yeah, we're all interdependent on each other. I depend on you for food, and you depend on me for glitter. That's my understanding of this poorly coordinated division of labor. So, this is our three. Durkheim says that the moral crisis of the modern world that we see because of the division of labor not giving this common morality, he said, don't think about it as the old morality. Think about how we're falling short of this new morality based on interdependence. It's really caused by the fact that we just haven't set up the division of labor properly. If we could do that, we could have that common sense of morality. In the next video, we are going to see, so as of right now, this is, I mean, I've used examples, but this isn't quite as scientific as Durkheim really was. Durkheim looked for examples of this stuff in suicide rates in Europe. And what he found were examples of, and I'm going to do an okay job of recapping suicide because it's one of many topics that he deals with. I'm going to do it in about 5 or 10 minutes, and we're going to focus not so much on his evidence. If you go to graduate school, you will almost certainly have to read suicide, and it will be kind of a pain because Durkheim is not an easy person to read. But the studies that he did to come up with his conceptualizations of different categories of suicide is super research. It is sort of in graduate school classes on on sociological research methods. It is sort of like the first example of this is how sociology is done scientifically. But we're going to use it in terms of examples of the failures of modern life to integrate people. And that's what we'll talk about in the next video.